How's it going, everyone? And welcome back. Okay, so we're doing something a little bit different with the intro here, kind of having it non-scripted because, well, again, I want to apologize for being super late with Deadpool. That video I was hoping was meant to come out at the end of February, but, well, you know the gist of it by now. So, I was going to do a special review after Deadpool. Originally it was going to be I had a couple ideas in my head, a longer game, something like that. But now that, Deadpool being what it was, what it came out, I decided to go something, kind of shorter than what I was going to do originally. And, yeah, this video is a short one. So, as for what I'm talking about, well, I decided to take a look at a game that, I played numerous times in the past, and even done for videos and such. I decided that I'd take a look at a very different game, and that game is Journey.
So, this should be interesting. Journey is the creation of That Game Company, who also worked on games such as the super calming Flower and the mind trip known as Flow. Speaking of these games, they were part of a 3-game contract between the developer and Sony, with Journey being the last one. Development began shortly after Flower's release, and after 3 years the game would be unleashed to the masses in March of 2012 as a downloadable title. My exposure to this game would be from this man right here. Eventually I would get to play it thanks to PlayStation Plus, and it's actually what would spark my Let's Play back in 2017. My subscription was running out, and I decided to use what time I had to record a playthrough, a collectible run, and one final run with the White Cloak. I haven't played this game since that stream, and I figured it would be neat to cover on the review channel at some point anyway. Despite being originally released for the PS3, I'm booting up the PlayStation 4 version mainly for convenience sake. Also, this is where I usually show a physical copy, which one does exist, but I didn't want to buy it just for the video.
Alright, it's time to begin our quest and attempt to talk about the story.
You control a robed individual who is making his way through various terrains and obstacles to get to the top of this mountain in the distance.
That's it?
Yeah.
That's all?
Yeah.
There's definitely more than that with these giant godlike figures and some insight into you being the only living entity as far as you're aware. But most of it is mainly up to interpretation and isn't something I'm comfortable with stating as factual. As far as my perspective, I find the world around you fascinating, and it's interesting piecing everything together with each playthrough I do. I want to know what happened to this place, and besides the main story cutscenes, there is optional bits to find which just give you some great insight to what might have been. It's even more interesting given that there's no dialogue whatsoever, and that's actually kind of impressive in my eyes when games go for that approach. As I said, it's just how I see it, and this is really the type of game you need to just play for yourself. If you are looking for something that's a lot more structured and clear-cut, then sad to say this isn't really going to tickle your fancy in that department.
Anyway, let's transition over to gameplay, and boy, are you in for a treat.
For this modern Sony-funded project, you only use, drumroll please, 2 buttons. What? Besides your basic movement and camera functionality, you have your flying/hover with the X button, and your communication ability with circle. I know when you hear this you might be kind of confused and maybe even a little apprehensive about the idea, but hear me out because it'll all make sense when I explain. So with your scarf, you fly in the air and can hover to the ground by holding in the button. You can make your scarf longer by collecting these white symbols scattered around, and word of advice is collect as many of these as you can find. Having longer airtime really does help, and it makes going up hills really fun too. Keep in mind how much energy you have because it does drain quickly, but as long as you're near red fabric of some kind, you should be okay. As far as you chatting, that's mainly just used for activating certain environmental objects. You aren't going to be using it for much unless you feel like entertaining yourself for whatever reason. I don't really know what else to add here because that's it, really. It is incredibly basic in practical terms, but for the type of game this is, it works and it does its job quite well. I mean, for something like ground speed, it can seem painfully slow, but it's kind of the point. It's something that can turn away a casual player, and I wouldn't blame you if that was the case.
Okay. Now for the other stuff.
I think this needs to be pointed out first, but my goodness, this game visually looks stunning. From the character models, environments, and everything in between, this is a sharp looking game, and also playing this on a PlayStation 4 really makes everything pop. Just get to the sand surfing sequence and you'll see what I mean. Also want to note the art design of the game is just sublime, and the devs really should be proud of what they came up with. The soundtrack composed by Austin Wintory is really a treat to the ears, and it's just fantastic overall. You got tons of tracks ranging from deep and thought-provoking to exciting and riveting pieces which really help the game in the long run. The music was that good that it managed to get nominated for a Grammy, which is fantastic. Along your journey,
He said it! He said it!
you can find some optional stuff to collect and or activate, which is one way to put it. So I mentioned the white symbols that make your scarf longer. These are littered all over, and upon collecting them all, you unlock a white cloak for future playthroughs. While this is cool, I wouldn't go out of my way just for this if I were you. I alluded to these earlier, but there are these wall panels you can materialize with your voice. Like the white cloak, these aren't really worth going after, but it is neat seeing the added lore given. One really cool thing is that you can find other players along your travels, and this can make subsequent playthroughs more fun when you have a buddy to tag along with you. I think it all depends on both you being signed in at the same time or something along those lines, and they even show you their usernames at the end of the credits, which is interesting. And who knows, they might be able to show you an Easter egg or two.
Now to send this video off with a bang and talk about my final thoughts.
Journey is a visual and auditory marvel with a compelling narrative, and is a game that I find myself just coming back to. At the same time, it's something that I find really hard to recommend to the general crowd. If these type of games are right up your alley, then by all means give it a shot, but for everyone else, I just don't think there's enough here to convince you otherwise. From a gameplay perspective, it's as basic as you can get, and also another issue no matter who you are is the game is extremely short. Like, you can beat this in under 2 hours short.
Yeah, I forgot to bring that up, my bad.
Regardless, if you're in for a philosophical adventure, then I would encourage you to play this at least once at some point. $15 is a bit steep, however, but if you see it on sale, it wouldn't hurt to buy it at that moment.
Man, when I said this video was going to be a short one, I wasn't kidding. So for a change of pace, I'm actually going to tell you what we're going to be looking at next time. So, when the time comes, we're going to be looking at Sonic Generation.
Hey!
What?
Journey. Really?
I don't know what your problem is. It's a neat little adventure.
I thought you told me you were going to do The Last of Us.
I was.
What happened?
Blame Alter.
Oh man, that's such a shame. I mean, here's a thought. What if you did it next time?
What, you want actual brand synergy just because the show came out?
No, I mean, I'm just invested in the series lately, you know, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. That's all.
Okay, well, I am flattered. I'm thinking now that I might want to save it for another day.
Oh, come on, please.
No.
Please.
I said no. I'm gonna do it. No, you're not gonna break me.
Excuse me. Excuse me. I get like this when I get upset.
Okay. I'll do it.
Sweet! Yes! Alright, I love you, man. Alright, I'm gonna get out of your hair now. I'll talk to you later. Peace out.
Well, I guess that's what we're looking at next time. But until then, I hope you all have a great night. Thank you all so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.
What?! Man, I can't wait till Arkham Trilogy comes out. When is the release date again? Oh, shit. I have an idea. Well, best I can do for now.
How's it going, everyone? And welcome back. So I know what you're thinking. We're reviewing DLC now? What's going on? Well, here's the thing. When I was writing the script for Spider-Man, it was becoming more apparent that I wanted to say more about the DLC, so it seemed appropriate to just make a dedicated video focusing on it. Also, I felt it was best that we get this out of the way now, since there's no real reason to push this way later than it needs to. Seems weird to do this, I know, but let's get into some backstory.
So as far as I remember, this was announced when Game Informer was doing their coverage, with a trailer for the first pack coming out days before the game was released. Not sure why they couldn't have waited until after it launched, but I still ended up playing each of them as they came out. My initial impressions were relatively positive, but the more times I played them, they just didn't click with me. I am really curious how this is going to go down, especially since the last time I played through all of these was for the Let's Play back in 2020. So how this is going to work is that I'm going to focus on each of them one at a time, so think of this as 3 micro-reviews crammed together. Also, I won't be going over gameplay since there's nothing added to justify a section talking about it. If you want to know my thoughts on it, I recommend you check out my review of the main game just as a refresher. Last thing I wanted to mention is that I'm using the original version of the game to play these, and while I thought about using the remaster, it seemed more appropriate to play these as originally intended and to have it closer to the previous review.
Alright, let's start this video proper and talk about the heist.
We pick up a few months after the main game. Since the takedown of Fisk, Octavius, and Lee, the Maggia crime families are planning a comeback to fill the void left by those 3. On one particular night, they're planning to take back a painting that is now hanging in a museum, with Peter swinging by to investigate. Upon stopping the goons from taking anything they can get their hands on, an old flame enters the scene in the form of Black Cat, who you think is here for the painting, but in actuality is here for a thumb drive which is inside the painting. After a wild goose chase,
I hate days of goose!
We come to find out why she's doing this, with Felicia trying to save her son that she now just has. In time we catch up from chasing her down, and she accepts Spidey's offer to help track her child down so they can save him. Eventually we make it to a shipping yard where her boy possibly is. We find out not only Hammerhead has Sable Tech, but all this was an elaborate ploy by Miss Hardy to steal the Maggia's fortune with all 5 drives. Steelhead was on this and left a surprise at her penthouse with the old Webhead rushing over to save her. As he arrives, the building explodes, leaving her death ambiguous and ending the first chapter of the story. The story itself is about what I expected. I knew most of it was going to be a game of cat and mouse. The first time, and it's not bad, it's just kind of there. I do really like this version of Black Cat, and I dig the chemistry between her and Peter. The stuff with her son didn't amount to much for me, but I will admit it was an interesting direction for them to go with her. Most of the interesting bits for me were the setup for things to come, which left me excited my first time. Only to lead to disappointment.
Don't worry, it's coming up.
For the most part, I think the narrative is enjoyable and worth playing just for the interactions alone. There's some real history here, and it's fun watching them play off each other. Otherwise, there's not much to go over, so let's move on. Oh god, no.
Oh god, no.
She's still here! Get on my game, you bitch!
The other stuff.
So first things I want to note right off the bat is that if you have some collectibles like backpacks and landmarks, you can still get them in the DLCs for whatever reason. Also, there are a set number of crimes per district, just like in the main game, which... why? It's not as many to be fair, but it's still one of the weaker parts of the 2018 game, so I don't know why they decided to carry this over for the DLC.
Why?
Anyway, these sections are going to be short because there isn't a whole lot to talk about besides the main story. But damn it, we're going to give it the old college try. First we have the stolen paintings, which aren't that amazing to collect, but you do get some insight and backstory for the original Black Cat, and it's interesting. You get to meet a new character in Detective Mackey, who seems like a chill dude. Also, the twist at the end is worth getting all the paintings. Next we have... Screwball.
What?
She shows up in the story to announce her new show, and think of these as Taskmaster challenges, but way more annoying. Not for the challenges themselves, but the fact she'll be in your ear the entire fucking time. As far as challenges, you have the obligatory combat one. There's an EMP one where you have to destroy them with your webs, very similar to the Electro boss fight. The best one by far is the gadget challenge, where you are limited to only a couple of gadgets, and these are fun. It's actually these that taught me about using certain gadget combinations, and that's weird to say because it's from Screwball. There are new crimes added to the DLC, but the only one I played involved the spider drone disarming bombs underneath people's cars. There are some suits to unlock also, and this selection, well, I'll get into it. They don't have any new suit powers to mess around with, but I'm okay with this. I love the Scarlet Spider 2 costume, and I think I'm one of the only people on this planet that actually likes the Resilient suit. Spider UK, I don't like this at all. Not a fan of the lenses, and the colors just throw me off, especially the blue. I almost forgot to mention the new enemy type, which is the minigunner. He can be a pain at times, particularly in crowds, but I like them, and I'm surprised we didn't get something like this in the main game. In short, there's stuff to do on the side, and none of it I would classify as bad, really. It adds some more meat to the package, and it'll keep you busy for some time.
So, what do I think of this first installment overall?
Marvel Spider-Man The Heist was everything I expected it to be, and what we got here is good. The story was enjoyable, and the things to do in New York serve its purpose well. I have some minor grievances with things like the crimes and her, but it's nothing that really left me disappointed. So in general, not a bad start at all.
Okay, let's move on to Turf Wars and see if I feel any better about this after 5 years.
With all the shit that happens in the heist, an all-out gang war started with Hammerhead taking on the other Magia Dons. Soon enough, he's cornered in this old Harlem building with Spidey, Yuri, and a squad of cops raiding the place. Let's just say it goes for the worst with the entire task force dead and Yuri in a state of shock. Spider-Man heads over to the bar with no name to get more info and finds out the Dons are all holed up in this one location. He manages to stop the raid outside, but they manage to slip in and take them anyway. Next, the cops try to move the Sable Tech he's been taking around the city, but this was all a distraction so they could hit the police station for this Project Olympus stuff. Yuri heads off in a fury, and the tension between the two partners is at an all-time high. Spidey discovers that Hammerhead is at this construction site where he's planning to murder the Dons on live television, but the wall-crawler saves him, of course, and puts the steel-plated menace in his tracks. Soon enough, Captain Watanabe arrives on the scene, and she straight-up kills the bastard. This leaves the cops, Peter, and Yuri at a stalemate, leaving their working relationship up in the air, and finishing off the story to the second DLC. Overall, this narrative feels non-existent. After the beginning and up until the end, things just kinda happen, with most of it being ambushes from Hammerhead's guys. Also on that note, Hammerhead is a non-entity in his own story. I like the idea of him trying to make the mob intimidating again, but if he actually did something throughout, I'd care more about it. Also, this version of the character really has nothing on John DiMaggio, both in presence and voice. The best thing by far is seeing more of Yuri Watanabe and her descent into evil. It's interesting hearing her struggle over the course of the narrative, getting to the point of her just going flat out rogue. We can also see the relationship between her and Spidey really being tested with this war happening, and all of it is just great. Anyway, this story DLC isn't bad, but it isn't great either, and I would have liked to see more come out of this.
Off to talk about sadness. I mean, the other stuff.
So for side missions, we have Hammerhead fronts and more Screwball. Ugh. The fronts are basically the demon hideouts from the main game, which I don't mind. Do yourself a favor and don't binge them one after another, because it will get tedious fast. There are some nice set pieces, however, with my favorite being this restaurant area. As for Screwball, we have combat gadgets, and the new challenge this time, stealth. I hate these with a passion. It takes the approach of do whatever you want and neuters it by making you have to take out every enemy a specific way. Also, don't get me started on trying to go after 3-star ranks and photobombs. I don't remember any of the new crimes added, so I'm just going to mention the new enemy type being these jetpack douchebags. Yeah, I'm putting this out there. Fuck these guys. Not only does their energy shield pack a punch, but the trail from their jetpack disables gadgets, which sucks. If there's any reason to complete the side activities, it's for the suits, which this is the best of the bunch as far as the DLC packs. I absolutely adore the Spider Armor Mark I. In a game filled to the brim with armored suits, this stands out among the rest, and it's a great translation from the comics. I also really like what they do with the comic Iron Spider. It's a nice mix of what we know and blends with the nanotech Iron Man suit from Infinity War. The best part has to be the spider-like suit power, which turns them into gold.
I love gold!
Last is the Spider Clan suit, which is my least favorite, but I do really like the cel-shaded look of it. Overall, I didn't hate the side quests, but I wasn't invested much either. And I don't have anything else to add to that.
So, what are my final thoughts?
Marvel's Spider-Man Turf Wars isn't inherently bad, but there's a lot here that is either disappointing or just a complete letdown. First of which is the narrative, which I said felt empty, but they don't give me a reason to give a shit about anything besides Yuri and Yuri. Also, the side stuff just doesn't really do it for me compared to the heist, which is just more interesting. If I were you, I would just play the story so you can get the best suits and just leave it at that. I didn't hate this DLC, but I wasn't satisfied whatsoever.
Okay, let's talk about the silver lining and put this video to rest. Man, I need to take a nap after this shit.
With all the insane events from the ending of the last DLC with Yuri killing Hammerhead and him also being resurrected.
Oh my god, zombie!
The gang war has only escalated since then, getting to the point where Silver Sable has to get involved to get her stuff back. There's a lot of tension between her and Spider-Man, but after some crime, Screwball, and a massive car chase, it's realized that the two of them have to work together in order to bring Hammerhead down. After a little more digging, a meetup is orchestrated, which is obviously a trap over at the Colexo building, with Sable rushing over to take down the boss. Unsurprisingly, it turns out to be an ambush, and this is where we finally see the revive. I can't tell you the amount of confusion I had the first time I played this DLC upon seeing this monstrosity on screen. I mean, it makes sense in context, but what is this thing? You took one of the most badass mobsters in the Spider-Man mythos, made him a joke in his own story, and then ruined him to the point of no return. This is such an insult to my eyes, and I genuinely hope for the sequels we never see this abomination again. Alright, back to the story. After a duel in the sky, Sable is captured by Hammerhead and Spidey is rescued by Black Cat, who is not dead and who is also here to give us information on how to stop this metal-plated douchebag.
Bye, Felicia.
Bye, Felicia.
Soon enough, we save Sable from the clutches of goons, and with the info in hand, they decide to take him out with a guided laser right to the plate inside his head. With everything set in place, Big Riddle crashes the boat party with the two of them kicking the ever-loving shit out of him, finally putting him down by crashing a plane into him. Our heroes say their goodbyes with Sable heading back to Symkaria and giving Pete a ride, finally closing this chapter and ending the saga of the city that never sleeps. As far as the plot is concerned, this is by far the best of the pack. Everything is wrapped up for the most part in a nice little bow, and it feels like a fitting conclusion to this arc. The best part is with its characters, with the highlight here being Silver Sable, which I wasn't expecting the first time through. You remember what I thought of her from the main game, and they did a complete 180 on her, and I'm all for it. From her desire to help her home country and to get her tech back from Hammerhead. What's also great is her and Spidey's chemistry. They have some resistance at first, which is expected, but after the trust sets in, it becomes something amazing, and it leads to some of the best moments in the game.
There are medical records in here.
Yeah, mostly about that metal plate in his head.
Carbon steel.
Super strong, pretty sensitive to
Heat.
In general, this was much better than Turf Wars and even the heist, and it leaves me satisfied while excited for what's to come in the future.
Let's talk about the other stuff for the last time.
First, we'll go over the Olympus hideouts since they're just like every other stronghold in the game. I do like that they all take place in abandoned subways and areas like it. But yeah, it's just the same 5 rounds of beating people up, so we'll leave it at that. As for Screwball, we have the Combat and Gadget Challenge, but the new addition this time is disarming bombs, except unlike Taskmaster, you have to break boxes! Oh no! At least this time we can go to a rooftop party after completing them and we can take her down for good.
Good lord, what a relief. If I have to hear photobomb one more time, I'm gonna kick the puppy into the wood chipper and drown a cat.
Last of the side stuff is these crime scene recordings, which can be a bitch to find at times, but just like the paintings, the ending is well worth it. The crime where you help the dude in his truck is fine, but the weakest part of the pack is the suits. Even though I do like 2 of the suits here, there is a counter-argument on why they could be switched out for something else entirely. First we have the Aaron Eichmann suit, which I do like the design for, and I think is the best looking of the bunch. But in a game that is filled with armored suits, I would have liked something more unique. Spider-Verse is fantastic and great promotion, but I think it would have been more fitting as a free update skin rather than something you pay for. Lastly is Cyborg Spider-Man, and not only is this another variant of the classic suit, but this is a 90s disaster that should have stayed in that decade. I guess it didn't matter anyway, since the Raimi suit came out right before this, so everyone just used that instead.
Which those people who bitched at Insomniac still don't deserve, by the way. Sorry, let's finish this off and tell you what my thoughts are on this pack.
Marvel's Spider-Man Silver Lining is the best of the trio, and everything about it brings me so much joy. From the story to the side missions. Also, even though I gave the suits some crap, I do really enjoy the Spider-Verse and Aaron Eichmann suits. Also gotta mention some great gameplay sections like the Peter Parker swinging and some heartwarming character moments like the Spidey Sable stuff. If you had to play one of these packs, I'd recommend this above all else. Not only for the points I mentioned, but it expands on the gameplay in all the right ways and it presents a fun and fair challenge, compared to the cakewalk that is the heist and the misery of Turf Wars. So yeah, go play it. That's it.
So now I think we should go over this expansion and see how it fares up to the main game.
So when it comes to the collection itself, I would say this is worth the investment if you want a little more out of the 2018 game. I think there's no other way to sum this up, and yes, while I do have my issues with each of them individually, it's more of what I loved from the main game. The gameplay is still great as ever, with opportunities to improve your skill with the gadget challenges and new enemy types. The story is serviceable, with it being stellar at its best, and at its worst, it's mildly entertaining. Most of the time. Not to mention it gives me more opportunity to swing around the city more, look for new collectibles, and punch a purse snatcher every once in a while. This is by no means perfect, with all of them suffering from similar problems across all 3 packs, and with Turf Wars getting the worst of it. If you love the main game, I recommend playing this at least once at some point, and mainly sticking with a story playthrough, but hey, if you want to be an achievement whore and get everything, you do you. For the $25 asking price, I don't think that's too much out of reach, and I guess you could buy them individually for $10, but I'd just get the whole thing. A sale's not a bad idea either. It's included in Spider-Man Remastered as well, so I guess it only matters if you own a PS4, but at that point you could just buy the Game of the Year edition and save yourself $1 or $2. Play this and see this city that won't take a goddamn nap.
Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up!
This was a interesting approach to this video, and certainly a bit different than anything I've done before. I'm excited for the game that we're looking at next, because a certain character is destined for greatness. I don't know when I'm going to get to that game, but I was thinking for next time that we hook up my GameCube.
Marvel!
Swfte.
When are you getting to The Last of Us?
It's coming up next.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'll start working on it when you quit asking about it.
Well, I'll be watching over to your shoulder to make sure you get it done.
What am I, in kindergarten now?
Like I said, I'm invested in the series, and I just want to make sure you don't mess anything up like you usually do.
Okay.
You know what? Whatever.
Well then. I guess I'll be going.
Good idea.
Anyway. See you next video.
tried avoiding it, but I guess the real next video is that we're looking at The Last of Us. The first game, I should mention, not part 2. Or the TV show. But until then, I hope you all have a great night. Thank you all so much for watching, and take care of yourself.
What?
I didn't have any other costumes on standby. Also, word of advice, don't order costumes from Wish. It's not a great idea. Anyway, how's it going, everyone? And happy Halloween! So I know some of you are probably wondering, where's The Last of Us? You said The Last of Us is going to be your last... I know. But since it's that time of the year, Spookum season, I wanted to try and do something a little, fun and festive. And, well, this is one of the reviews on my bucket list, and something that I was already planning on doing this year, so it was just the perfect occasion. But rest assured, I know I said I was going to do The Last of Us, and I'm still going to put that video out by the end of the year, so don't worry, it's coming. The script's being written, the game's being recorded, and hopefully by the time this video comes out, I might already be done it, but we'll see. But so yeah, I'm not sure how to segue into the video, but yeah, here we go.
Anybody remember Splatterhouse? It was originally a beat-em-up released in the arcades back in 1989. Developed by Namco, it was notable for its violent and graphic imagery while also being a loving tribute to the slasher films of the decade. In time, it would get a home console release for the TurboGrafx-16, but also would spawn 2 more sequels for the Genesis, as well as the Japan exclusive Wanpaku Graffiti. This series was also notable for leading to the creation of the ESRB, along with games such as Mortal Kombat, for example.
It's kind of crazy when you really think about it.
Splatterhouse would make cameos in other games over the years, like in Tekken, Point Blank, and even Katamari. But it seemed like a true revival of the series just wasn't in the cards and was something that the fans could only dream of. Announced back in 2007, this reboot was originally being developed by Bottle Rocket, who were known for making Rise of the Kasai, a tie-in game for Solid Showdown, and were making a Flash game before it got cancelled.
Anybody remember that show, by the way?
During this period, Namco wasn't happy with how the game was progressing, so in early 2009, the game would be delayed to that next year and would be taken away from Bottle Rocket. There are many reasons for this decision, and I recommend you check out Matt McMuscle's video on the subject. Just by looking at the early trailers and beta footage, there is some genuine effort here, and I'm curious how things would have gone down if Bottle Rocket had been able to see it to completion. To save the project, Namco decided to finish the game in-house with help from some former Bottle Rocket staff and the Afro Samurai team. The game would release in November 2010 for PS3 and Xbox 360, and it was destroyed by the critics. But it seems it's retained some sort of a cult status over the years. I would learn of the franchise thanks to this guy, and it wasn't until recently where I was able to get a copy for myself. I've dabbled with it a little bit, but for the most part I'm going into this review relatively blind. The version I'll be looking at is for the Xbox 360, and as far as the PS3 version, I don't own it, and maybe we'll save it for a revisited episode down the line.
Anyway, we ready to dive right in? Well, let's jump head first and talk about the story.
Meet Rick Taylor. He's a lovable nerd, has a wicked hot girlfriend, and is currently bleeding out on the floor.
Wow. Was not expecting that for an opener.
Before succumbing to his injuries, a voice appears in his head which is coming from this mask telling Rick that he can give him the power to save his girl. With no other choice, Rick puts on the mask which gives him a John Cena bod, and the two protagonists set off to rescue Jennifer and stop whatever plan Dr. West has up his sleeves. The general plot is straightforward, but you could make a point that it's trying to feel similar to the original arcade game. There's more to it here with 5 eclipses that'll bring about the apocalypse from this race known as the Corrupted, but the main goal above all else is to save Jennifer. I like that the game never loses sight of that, and it helps that they're a really cute couple that you want to have a happy ending. One of my favorite parts is how much they expand upon the original arcade title and how most of our questions are answered over the course of the game. Some examples include the origins of the mask, how Rick found it, or maybe how it found Rick, the reason why Rick and Jennifer arrive at the mansion, and why Dr. West is doing what he does. These are points the original would have glossed over at best, but this game really fleshes things out, and it's all the more impactful because of it. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the story is presented in flashbacks and through dialogue within levels, so some of it might come off as missable or even a bit confusing. Let's talk about the cast, because we got some real A-listers here. Jim Cummings is the voice of the Terror Mask, and he is the star of the show. He is both hilarious and incredibly demented all at once, and his lines are some of the best in the game. Whether it's abusing/helping Rick, getting poetic about mass murder, or even just breaking the fourth wall.
Jesus, Rick, get it together. I asked you to trust me. First sight of blood, you're crying like a schoolgirl. For a dick, you are such a pussy. There, all better now. They are everything, nothing. The many-angled ones. Tons. They inhabit the abyss. What's said and what's understood. But look who's back. Show him why we call it Splatterhouse.
Josh Keaton plays Rick Taylor, and he does a fantastic job too. He conveys a spectrum of emotions, and you can really feel his struggle between being resistant towards this power he's been given, or fully embracing it to save Jen. Speaking of which, I really like who they got for Jennifer, and I dig the approach and voice for Dr. West.
So let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this video, and talk about the gameplay.
Just in the general sense, it's your usual character action game. You have your light and heavy attacks with X and Y, which you can charge by the way. Right bumper is your block and roll, a grab which is serviceable, and of course a jump button for attacking foes in the air and for some platforming. You have a sprint with the right trigger, which I mainly use for certain obstacles, but it is useful for some enemies. As you fight and kill, you'll fill up a blood meter under your health bar, and this has a number of uses. By holding the left trigger and pressing the face buttons, you'll utilize the power of the mask, which can range from blades which will slice through multiple enemies, a slam attack, and a healing move which is the most useful to pull off. When the meter is full, you can activate a berserk mode, which is cool, but you'll just forget you'll have it most of the time. Outside of the beginning of the game, you'll rarely find yourself needing to use it. Maybe for a boss, I guess, but I'd rather save the meter to heal instead of using it to get extra jacked up.
More than I already am.
If Splatterhouse is known for one thing, it's for weapons, and man do we have a selection. You have your melee options like a meat cleaver, lead pipe, and a trusty 2x4. Thing is, the swing leaves you open to get pummeled, so be cautious. Others include a shotgun and even a goddamn chainsaw. There's some weird ones like an enemy head and even your own fucking arm. The weapons are fun to mess around with, but I have my issues. Besides what I said before, they can break after a bit, so the enjoyment of using them doesn't last long. Plus it takes one monster to drop it from your hand, and it just sucks. After beating on an enemy, a red aura will appear, and that will allow you to perform a splatter kill, which is essentially a glorified fatality.
Fatality.
Piss off. You know, I actually should get to that series one day.
These are cool to pull off, but it can get a little tiring seeing the same animations over and over again. You have ones like ripping off arms and heads, but you also have ones like Rick pulling out intestines through a monster's anus. Jeez. My favorite is taking off an entire torso. I would recommend doing these when you can, because you get a bit of health and some blood for the meter, but also some extra currency for upgrades. With blood, you can buy the standard selection of new attacks, extra health, and related things like that. Don't know where to put this, but if you get lost, you can press up on the D-pad and it'll lead you in the right direction. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing what it's trying to tell you, but it's only a minor hiccup. In short, what we have isn't the most dynamic combat system, but it is a satisfying one. You could be in a room with 9 creatures or 2 bosses, and it can be enjoyable tearing enemies to pieces. Don't get me wrong, it can get repetitive, but they do find ways to spice it up in levels, which I'll get into later. But for the most part, I really enjoyed the gameplay.
Now on to the other stuff.
There's 12 levels in total, and these are enjoyable to travel through. Besides the mansion, you'll be exploring other areas like a meat factory, an evil amusement park, a destroyed New York City in the future, and even a mirror dimension, just to name a few. I like that we're not limited to just one location, and they have a way of explaining with these portals you travel through between levels. Within these stages, there are some things to note, like the puzzle elements that are sprinkled throughout, which can be creative. Whether it's launching baddies into spikes to open a door or feeding a giant mouth to pass through, they do have their moments and are a nice way of spicing up the combat scenarios. One addition I'm not a fan of are these platforming sequences. These were just poorly implemented and can be a nightmare to get through. Speaking of sequences, there are these 2D sections and I'm very mixed on these. They're a nice throwback to the original games, but the physics clearly don't work here. Just count how many times you make a jump that should be easy, but you still fuck up and die. I like the idea, but the execution needed some work. Like the fact the difficulty just ramps up dramatically, which is just jarring. I guess the only thing related to levels is the collectibles. There are these gramophones which give some insight into Dr. West, and these torn pictures of Jennifer scattered around. Besides getting a view, they give you some tidbits into their relationship, which is neat.
I swear to God, you put this on the internet and your ass is grass, Buster.
Outside of the story, there's some other stuff to look forward to. First up is the survival arenas, which is pretty self-explanatory. These are placed from certain set pieces from the campaign, and these are mainly here for blood to upgrade, and you can find additional gen picks. There are these written journals to look through, but by far the best unlockable is the original Splatterhouse trilogy you can play. They didn't need to include this, but it was a nice incentive for OG fans, and I can commend that. Graphics look okay. I like the comic book look and the creepy atmosphere to accompany it. Some animations can look a bit crude or just plain bad, but it doesn't impact much for me. Bosses are... well, there are a lot of repeats, mainly with the regular bunch, which gets old. The Poltergeist boss is okay, and the grand finale just plain fucking sucks. The best one by far is the fight against the Biggie Man. From the throwback at the start and being able to use one of his chainsaws against him is awesome. Music is great overall. You have a nice original score from Howard Drawson, which pumps me up immensely, and also a number of licensed music from Mastodon and Lamb of God, just to name a few. Overall, a nice mix of both, with my favorite tracks being the doll theme and the music for the Corrupted. It isn't available anymore, but there was DLC which included extra arenas and also extra masks you can wear. A couple are throwbacks to the original series, but there are some other designs which look really neat. There's also some console exclusive masks, and I like both. Xbox just has a literal console on his face, and the PS3 has this Japanese mythology looking one that just works.
Before we end, there's one thing I need to bring up, and it's a little bit of a shame that I have to talk about this, but the bugs.
I know this seems like a minor thing to talk about, but it gets to a point where it just becomes distracting. You got stuff like frame rate drops, audio hiccups. The one thing that this game is known for is the long load times, which is only an issue if you keep dying repeatedly in one spot and have to see this over and over and over again. I had this bug where the subtitles were stuck on the screen, and I was worried it would be like this through the whole recording session. So yeah, it is something to consider when playing this, and I wanted to bring it up at some point or another.
So now to give my final thoughts. Sorry, just getting into the season.
Splatterhouse 2010 is a solid time, and I would recommend a run-through at some point. From the gameplay to the story, the extras, as well as stuff like the music and the voice acting, this is an enjoyable game with a dismemberment and splatter. It has its problems with the glitches and that the game can become tedious, but more often than not it has more good qualities than bad. If this had a bit more time to be polished, we could have really had something stellar. But what we got was very commendable given its history, and I definitely would want to jump back into this soon. If you find this for the right price, then snag it for the collection. Giving it the old seal of approval, I guess.
It's a shame that we'll most likely never see another game in this series again. Especially with that cliffhanger of an ending, but I would love to see either a new game in the style of Streets of Rage 4 and Shredder's Revenge, or even a remake of this game. Apparently there was a patent for Splatterhouse Encore back in 2019, I think, and, you know, nothing ever materialized for that. The fact that there's still an audience with this game and this franchise brings me a ton of joy, so it gives me hope that someday we'll grab a 2x4 and do some fucking carpentry once more. Alright, I'm not beating around the bush anymore. I'm not making you guys wait another year or so. Next video is definitely going to be The Last of Us, so I hope everybody sticks around and tunes in for that. But before we do anything, let me just take this tight costume off. Wait, was that Jennifer? Should I do something? I mean, I got these printed on web shooters, so that's gonna do nothing. What am I gonna do?
She doesn't have to die.
Oh no, I know how this is gonna work, so you're not gonna fool me. On the other hand, John Cena body. Fuck it. What do I gotta lose anyway?
What?!
Man, I'm nervous. I am really nervous about this video.
I would sure hope so. I had to wait even longer after that Splatterhouse video.
Come on, it was Spookum season, and I wanted to celebrate. Oh yeah, I forgot about those.
Still, I've been waiting nearly a year for this.
And I'm saying you need to lighten up. Can't knock a guy for having a bit of fun.
Whatever. You gonna start this thing soon?
Are you gonna hassle me the entire video?
You owe me this one. Just one.
2 words. Intensive treatment.
Point taken.
Alright, time to bite the bullet. Before you ask, this is the closest thing I could find to emulating the look. So, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back. So, with some recent installments to this franchise and under threat, basically, I thought it was appropriate that we talk about one of the best story-driven games in recent memory, and a personal favorite of mine. This is The Last of Us.
Oh boy, this will be an interesting one to go through. The Last of Us is the brainchild of Neil Druckmann and was developed by Naughty Dog, who is best known for the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy, Jak and Daxter, and the Uncharted series respectively. If you thought Spider-Man being my first Insomniac game was bad, prepare to be more upset because The Last of Us was my first Naughty Dog title. Work for the game started shortly after Uncharted 2 release, with Neil having ideas and concepts going all the way back to when he was a student in a university. It was formally announced at the 2011 VGAs, and I remember actually watching this live on TV. It was both levels of interesting while also being shit your pants terrifying. The game would release in June of 2013 to universal acclaim, and at this point I was unaware since I had an Xbox and only cared about cape stuff. Mainly Batman. When I got my first PS4, the game came bundled with it, and after doing 4 playthroughs of Arkham Knight in a row, I didn't play much of it. I wouldn't pick it up again until my playthrough I did back in 2017, and you could tell it was mostly blind for sure.
I think we can squeeze through here.
I thought they were gonna do like that tease the end of this horror movie. Oh man. I'm trying to fight the tears. Oh my god. Wow. I'm tearing up. I'm not kidding, I wish I had face cam. I played the game since then, and I've been itching to do another one recently with the TV series being a thing. Even though I'm, a year late, let's go ahead and review it anyway. While I do own the original PS3 version, I'll be playing the game via the remastered version that came out a year after its initial release. It mostly just bumps up the resolution, frame rate, and also improves the graphics slightly. I'm also going over the Left Behind DLC and mentioning the remake for PlayStation 5.
Wow, we have quite a video ahead of us. But let's dive in and talk about the story.
Meet Joel and his daughter Sarah. They're a lovely father-daughter duo when all of a sudden the world around them goes completely to shit and people turn into mindless fungus-infected monsters. With the help of Joel's brother Tommy, they escape into the city where the truck they're driving in is completely totaled. They run through the chaos unfolding and run into some trouble with some soldiers. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go over so well. We cut to 20 years later in Boston where we meet our partner Tess and learn that an arms dealer named Robert has taken their cache of weapons from them. After catching up, Robert lets us know that he sold the guns to the Fireflies, who are a militia group battling against what remains of the military. Their leader Marlene arrives to tell us that she'll double the amount of firearms only if they do one single job for her, which is to smuggle a young girl named Ellie over to the Capitol building. Some shenanigans occur, which include learning that Ellie is immune to the spores that turn people into the infected, arriving to a couple of dead bodies, and finding out Tess was bit along their travels. With the situation in hand, it's up to Joel and Ellie to make their way to Salt Lake City, dealing with all matters of obstacles and spread out across multiple seasons. Though whether or not, like it's an actual TV show or something. I stopped the recap because this is one of those games I would just prefer you experience the narrative for yourself. There are a lot of great moments throughout, and I don't want to rob people of those integral sequences. The story itself is fantastic and worth all the praise it's been given over the years. This is a dark and depressing world, but there are glimmers of hope, like Ellie for example. She's a lovable asshole and just a fun contrast to Joel's seriousness. Joel has been through the ringer, and you just feel for him with what he's experienced during this apocalypse. The best part of the narrative is the dynamic between our two main leads. There's a lot of tension and resistance at first, and they slowly warm up to each other, and it leads to an amazing bond. It has to be one of my favorite dynamics in any video game. Besides our main duo, there's a whole plethora of side characters to get attached to, like Tess, Marlene, Bill, Tommy, and the brothers Henry and Sam, just to name some. Like I said, this is an amazing story, and it's something you should just play for yourself.
Alright, on to gameplay.
What we have here is a third-person shooter action-adventure that might seem like a Resident Evil game on the surface, but I'd say it's a bit more than just that. Let's begin with the combat you can do, and it's serviceable. You'll just be mashing square until Joel kills the person with an animation. They might throw a punch, which you can counter, but otherwise there's not much to it than that. You can hit them also with melee weapons such as pipes and bats, but you can only hit them so much before they break, so there's that. The main thing is the weapons, which there is a variety of. You have guns which range from pistols, shotguns, hunting, and assault rifles. You also have others like a bow and arrows, a flamethrower, and even throwable items like pipe bombs and Molotov cocktails. You can find bricks and bottles to fight with also, but I saved them more for stealth sections, which I'll get to soon. There is a lot to choose from, and each of them have their uses for any situation you find yourself in. I love that I can tackle any obstacle in a number of ways, and they're all fun to mess around with. For this playthrough, I got comfortable with weapons that I don't normally use that often, like the hunting rifle and the shotgun, and even threw in a little Molotov cocktail and pipe bomb, just for added measure. Let's talk about stealth for a second, because just like combat, it's very simple. You go behind and hit triangle, which you can either choke them out or shoot them, which will start a fight, and why would you do that? Just gonna leave it here because that's it really. There's really nothing to go over with that. The main component of The Last of Us is resource management. All over the place you'll find stuff like ammo for your weapons or loose materials that allows you to craft certain items like medkits and molotovs. You can even augment your melee weapon and make it a little better. I always pick up what I can and make sure I'm stocked up on everything so I'm never underprepared for what's ahead. Upgrades are essential with two types including weapons and skills. At the crafting tables you can improve your guns with stuff like reload speed and capacity. You can even add extra holsters to make switching between them easier. These can be purchased with these scrap metal pieces, and you can find toolboxes which gives you different levels of upgrades. With skills there's stuff like crafting faster and even reduced weapon sway. These are great, but finding the pills to help augment yourself is a bit scarce. The last few things you can do is sprint with L1, turn on a flashlight for dark areas with R3, and use focus mode with R1. This allows you to pinpoint highlighted enemies, and this is extremely useful for stealth scenarios. Overall, the gameplay is really good and super easy to pick up and play. I get a kick out of the weapons, and while stealth and combat seem lacking, they do their job well enough.
Let's see what else this game has to offer.
So the first thing I need to mention is that I'm not bringing up the multiplayer. I don't have PlayStation Plus, and I don't want to invest when I know I'm not going to say much about it in the first place. With that said, there's 12 chapters in total with areas that span all across the country. From Boston to Salt Lake City, there's a number of locations that you'll be exploring, and it's interesting to see how each of them approach the post-apocalyptic setting. There's collectibles to look out for within the levels, which can range from letters, comic books, and even these firefly pendants. This is a nice incentive to explore the environments, and I recommend reading the letters for your first playthrough. It also gives some insight and world building, so if you're into that kind of thing, go nuts. Once you beat the game, you'll have the option of playing through again on New Game Plus, which is always a cool addition.
Did you catch the joke? Addition. For New Game Plus. Ha ha ha! I hate myself.
Also, after beating the campaign, you're awarded cash, which you can use to purchase concept art, filters you can toggle, and different cosmetics for your character. It isn't really anything fancy, with most of it being different shirts and stuff like that, like this one for example.
You're not going to find Joel in a cow costume or Ellie as a fish. Even though that would be super hilarious.
Graphics are great and still hold up really well. As a late PS3 title, this really took advantage of the console's capabilities, and with the remaster's higher resolution and frame rate, it's just the cherry on top of the cake. Just to mention this, but there isn't really much differences between this and the original, and it was just an excuse to have this game on PS4. Which was common back then. The music by Gustavo, that guy, is just immaculate and one of my personal favorite video game OSTs ever. It's unlike any other soundtrack I've ever heard from a AAA title like this, and there's no track that isn't an 11 out of 10 right off the bat. We have DLC with most of it being cosmetics and maps for factions, which is whatever, but there is something else of interest.
Okay, I think it's time we talked about this.
Alright, so Left Behind is a story DLC that is a prequel which takes place weeks before the main story and also jumps to a specific part of the narrative. They started working on this right after finishing up the main game and with it releasing on February 14th, 2014. People really enjoyed it, and not only was it bundled with the remaster, but it also got a standalone release a year later, which... sure? I just played this on the remaster cause... why wouldn't I? But anyway, let's get into it. As mentioned, the story focuses on Ellie and how she got bitten with her best friend Riley, while present events are happening after the university attack. The past event is really interesting. It paints a picture of what Ellie's life was like before she met up with Marlene, and we also have a cute and dynamic relationship between Riley and her. There's tension between them, but we also see a playfulness that best friends would have. That's pretty impressive for a character we only knew through dialogue. When it comes to the other half, it's just Ellie on a mission to get some first aid supplies. That's it.
There's not much else to it, really.
In both settings, you're going through a mall with one of them letting you have fun and the other having you avoid assholes and the infected. I like that you're doing things like photo booths, merry-go-rounds, and shooting water guns. Overall, this was really enjoyable and I had a good time going through it. I like the story being told here, and I also like playing as Ellie before she... You know what, never mind. One thing to keep in mind is that this DLC is extremely short, with it being a little over an hour to complete. But for fans of the game and people just getting into it, you'll find something to enjoy.
So now it's time for you to talk the talk on the remake. Yeah.
What do you mean?
The remake for the PS5?
What's that?
You mentioned it earlier!
No, I didn't. I'm just kidding. Let's get into it.
The Last of Us Part 1 is a complete remake of the original, built from the ground up, and was released back in September of 2022, with a PC release following 6 months later. I remember when the rumors for this started to circulate back in 2021, and I even made a rant pointing out that it was completely unnecessary. When it was officially announced, I can't say I was really excited, and the high price tag didn't make things any better. Especially when you can play the remaster through backwards compatibility for $20, and the idea of rebuilding a game that wasn't even 10 years old was just baffling to me. Sure, it looks prettier, but this couldn't save the fact that this just screamed as a cash grab.
Sorry, tangent over. Let's get down to specifics.
Getting into the main change, this game looks really incredible. The amount of detail in the character models and environments is out of this world and is a major improvement from the original. The aesthetic is meant to stick closer to Part 2, which is understandable. Something about the original I just like more, but I still like what they did here. The voice acting, music, and even cinematics are the same, which is good, but it's weird seeing them all in real time. The gameplay is also untouched, but I'm a little disappointed because this could have been a good opportunity to add some of the best additions from Part 2. Being able to dodge attacks, crawl on the ground, and having a permanent shiv were just great features, and I think it would have been neat to see how they would have incorporated into the level design we're familiar with. Even just having it as an option would have been nice, but the fact that it was omitted entirely just feels like a strange decision.
I just missed the permanent knife.
Also, this might be just me, but there's something about the game that just feels slower. It might be the animations fucking with me, but I felt like it was dragging its feet more than the remaster did. Besides the exclusion of multiplayer, it still has tons of extra content from the returning filters, gameplay modifiers, and skins, which include these two. Ugh. This is definitely in need of the revisited treatment, because as far as my thoughts at this moment, I enjoyed what I played, but it's not worth its asking price. It is a visual marvel compared to its previous releases, and at the same time I would rather just play the original. There's just these little things that make me like it more, plus it's cheaper. If you're insistent on playing this, wait for a sale.
Okay, now to sound off my final thoughts.
The Last of Us is a phenomenal piece of gaming media that has stood the test of time and that should be experienced by everyone. The story is exceptional with its themes and characters, the gameplay is good to experiment with, and I really like the weapons and the concept of using any resource necessary. Plus, there's lots of extra content to dive into and gives the game some replayability. Even though I did burn myself out playing this, I can't deny how excellent the overall package is, and I would recommend this to the highest degree. Even with all the issues I have, this is for sure in my top 10 favorite games ever created. Play it. There's nothing else to say. Just play it.
Are you satisfied, Mr. Swfte?
That was incredible. It was worth the wait. Seriously.
I'm glad. Now you can stop fucking bothering me about it.
Hold on. Shut up. Sorry. I just have to ask this. You're gonna do part 2, right?
Well...
Well, could I at least join you for that one? Rather than just sitting here in my alternate universe?
You know what, sure. I know you and I have differing opinions on this, so it'll make for an engaging video.
Awesome. Yes.
Now what am I gonna do next?
Can I make a suggestion?
Please don't.
I'm just messing with you. I'm really looking forward to the next one, though.
I mean, there's so many things that mean so much to me. I could do Mortal Kombat. I could do Tron.
Sonic Generations?
Pardon?
It had it at the end of the Journey video, so it's gotta be something you should do soon.
No.
I could join you for it, and it'll be an entertaining deep dive, and you know your audience loves me, and every time I appear in a video, the numbers go up, man. The numbers don't lie.
I'm gonna say this once. Go away!
But gotta go fast.
Alright, I'm putting you to a stop.
At least he won't bother us anymore.
You can go too.
Alright, I'm done. But before...
What a douche.
So we're definitely not doing Sonic next. But, honestly, even I don't know what we're doing next. But until then, hope you all have a great night. Thank you all so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.